I'm Jen in Mexico.
And I'm Stephanie in Portugal. And welcome to this week's episode of Americans Abroad.
This week, we're going to talk about safety. As I live in Mexico, you would not believe the things that people ask me about life in Mexico and what they think life is like here. And I will tell you, before I moved here or visited, I didn't know what life was like here either. And I didn't particularly myself think of it as being unsafe. I just thought of it as being kind of dusty, like the way that you see in American movies, like the
Like in a Western.
Yes. And I knew this couldn't be right. I knew it wasn't right. But because I knew 150 million people lived here and they all didn't live in the Wild West, but I didn't know what it looked like. And so all I could picture was in northern Mexico kind of does look like this, but it's like Dust Bowl, me and my Spurs heading into the saloon doors.
Morgantown.
Yeah, exactly. And I will tell you, first of all, I don't know if you know this, but Mexico, the continental Mexico has more diverse climate zones than the US does.
Oh.
And it even has a little bit of polar because of the mountains that it has. So it has every single climate zone. Now, most people don't live in the polar climate here. Many more people live in tropical or temperate climates here. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about safety, though, in particular. And a question people ask me a lot is Mexico safe? This is really relevant this week because we're recording this on Tuesday, February 24th. And on Sunday, February 22nd, there was a skirmish between cartels and the military in Mexico that led to burning cars in different states across Mexico. And it was portrayed quite dramatically, especially on US television. And I'm not here to fearmonger about it, and I'm not here to whitewash it either. I'm not going to get into the weeds on what the experience was like on the ground because we have some guests who can talk about it, including our own clients in Puerto Vallarta. We had a scouting trip going on in Puerto Vallarta during the time that the cars were burning and everything else, and it extremely pivoted the course of the tour. But the group did great. Our guides were phenomenal. No one felt threatened. It's very different what happens on the ground than what you see in the media. And I wanted to share one thing about it, which is if you saw footage and you see fires burning across the city, it's very dramatic. And I think the reason why it looks so dramatic is because to us and our generation, it looks like Baghdad or Gaza. It looks like a place that has been bombed. However, in this instance, it is car fires. And I'm not trying to minimize car fires. Nobody wants to be around when a car is set on fire. It is very scary, or for it to be your car. But at the end of the day, the Eagles won the Super Bowl and a car's getting set on fire. Jess, our social media manager in France, said, it's an average Tuesday if there's a protest. And it looks more dramatic than it is. That said, obviously, nobody wants there to be crime or violence, but it is a part of life. And so when people ask me, is a place safe? Here is what I want to talk about. No place is safe. That's just the God's honest truth. There is no safe place on earth. If you want safe, stay in your bed. And even then, then you have a heart attack because you're not moving around. You die of boredom or loneliness. You can look at data. And one thing I often quote is that where I live in Mérida, Yucatan, there are 1/40th as many murders per capita as there are in Birmingham, Alabama, the city that I'm from. It is important to note I did live in the Birmingham city limits, and I did not feel scared living in Birmingham. So why would I feel scared here?
Right.
That doesn't mean that nothing will ever happen. I can't control it. I can't predict it. And we all have to come to terms with risk and what that means to us and what it looks like day to day. Just in the same way that you get in your car, and unless you are suffering from anxiety, you aren't thinking constantly about how another car could come out of nowhere and hit you. Or when you're in a plane and you aren't thinking about the plane going down. I'm always thinking about the plane going down, but I do it anyway, right? Because I want to go to fun places and I want to see the world. So I deal with it anyway. And so the first question is just, what does that mean to you? Say, if you mean data, I can give you the data 100 different ways. And I don't want to, because I want you to figure out what safe is to you. I don't want to, you can make a lot of money scaring people or luring people. And I don't want to do either. It is not in my nature. I want to just tell you the facts and you figure out what safe is to you. I think that what people mean most often when they ask is if a place is safe is they're certainly not asking me if something will happen to them because I can't know, they can't know, no one knows. I think they are asking me if they will feel safe. And that I can't know either, right? Because I can't understand another person's tolerance for risk and what that looks like to them. For me, what I am most scared of is being trapped. And the perfect example is the Truman Show. If you ever saw the Truman Show, you know, Jim Carrey is in Seaside, Florida, in a perfect little town, and they have convinced him that danger lurks at every exit to this island. And so he thinks if he drives across the bridge, then it catches on fire every time. And that if he goes in a boat, there's a storm every time and he'll drown. But he finally realizes that he's more afraid of being trapped in the Truman Show than he is of the storms or the fires. And it turns out they're fake.
Yeah.
Now, things can happen. And that's the thing. I don't want to say, yeah, it says perfectly safe. Nothing will ever happen. And then you come down. And also, maybe you come down and your car gets set on fire. Well, to me, you're still safe. If someone didn't set your car on fire because it was you and they just happened to pick your car in the Costco parking lot, I mean, that's a property crime. But that might make you feel unsafe.
Exactly.
One thing I noticed about the headlines around Puerto Vallarta, there were all these headlines about terrified tourists, trapped, all these things. Whereas I was watching the WhatsApp chat of our group and they're like, okay, well, the grocery store is still closed. I'm going to the pool. Okay, well, Ubers are backed up. Oh, great. Oh, alcohol services turned back on. They were very much living their normal lives and they were not panicking. And that's the kind of, clients that we tend to draw, right? But there were other people who were panicking and they were in the exact same scenario. So it is a matter of deciding what the risk reward is for you. Only you can decide that. And I know that what you want is for me to reassure you so that you can feel safe. But the truth is, I will not always be there, and I need you to reassure yourself. That is, and I understand too why safety is so tantamount right now because people are feeling unsafe in the US. And so all they can think is, where can I get to the safe? I feel unsafe. I feel unsafe. I want to get somewhere safe. The world is very tumultuous right now, and it probably is going to be for a little while. And so if I get you out, and let's say you do feel safe, I need you to be thinking about what you're going to be wanting next. What do you want once you feel safe? What's next? And let's be talking about that. So I just want to address it about, we've gotten so many questions because we do live in Mexico. And of course, lots and lots of lovely people have written and called to check in on us. We're fine. We had a completely normal weekend aside from lots of checking in on our guests. Of course, we made cookies. We watched TV. We went back to Pilates today. It's just life here is very normal. I took some footage. There were about 150 4-year-olds coming into the mall. Like people are living their lives here in Mexico, just like everyone in the US is living their lives, even if they're not in Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's important to recognize that there are agendas out there. And if something like what happened in Puerto Vallarta would be world ending for you, then it might not be for you. You might be better off in Malta. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be for you. One of our guests who we'll talk to, well, I have a message from her now, who hopefully we'll talk to. It was a great experience for her. She ended up staying with strangers in an Airbnb because the road was blocked to get home, and complete strangers took her in. And that is what life is like here in Mexico.
And safety was a big concern for us when we were deciding where we wanted to go. For us, what was real fears of safety, and not to say that other people's fears aren't real, but actual threats. My partner is a drag performer, and this would have been in Texas, 2003, early 2004, where it wasn't just protest with signs, it was protest with guns. And I remember asking David, if something happens, do you know where the exits are? And recognizing, you know what, if you want to steal my phone out of my back pocket, great, but you cannot take the most important person from me. So for me, that was that safety thing was however much money, whatever possession, whatever fine, it is that real in our face violence um, that he witnessed, and and that I witnessed. And so um, I think we could kind of deal with anything at that point. Anything felt like a step up. Um, and I think when the idea of feeling safe, you really have to lean on that word feeling. It just has to feel, when I take my dog out for a walk at 11 o'clock at night, in a, relatively busy neighborhood, I don't feel unsafe. I don't feel like I'm going to get accosted. I don't feel like someone's going to threaten me or catcall or anything like that, because I feel it in every time that I test the waters of going out at night and walking outside as by myself as a woman, that my assumptions are proven true, and it just reinforces that safety. So, when we say that you have to figure it out for yourself and find out for yourself, it's really testing the waters, and deciding, does this feel safe? And just trusting your instinct that if it continues to prove true, then to lean on it.
And to answer your question, yes, I feel safe in Mexico. Well, not your question. To answer all of your question, yes, I feel safe in Mexico. Yes, I feel safer than I did at home. It doesn't mean that something couldn't happen. And I trust that if something were to happen, that I will be able to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't want anybody to miss out on the joys of life because of fear of what might happen. There's just so much life out there to be lived, and in amazing places all across this world.
It's time for listener questions.
Amazing.
If you want us to answer your questions, you can send a message to podcast@expatsy.com, and we will try to get to it in a future episode. So, Stephanie, I want to ask you a question because I know it's near and dear to your heart. Someone said, we would never leave our animals ever. I would appreciate hearing from your group about the best available transportation options for domestic animals from the U.S. to overseas destinations.
Definitely a topic near and dear to my heart. We moved from Texas to Porto, Portugal, with our 2 French bulldogs. They're the light of my life. They are my biological children. You cannot tell me any different. But it was, I don't even want to say it was a challenge. There's just a lot of moving parts when it comes to moving your animals overseas. Every country is going to have different requirements for what you need to provide, what documentation, what the timeline looks like. From our experience for EU, it is pretty much the same across the board. You'll need a vet certification, which gets sent to the USDA. They stamp it, make it all official, and you'll need that within 10 days of arriving in your new country. So timelines can get a little tricky. As far as options for transportation, there are really three main options, or maybe four, depending on the size of your animal. Of course, if you've got a tiny little baby, you could possibly bring them in cabin. Again, it depends on where you're headed and what airlines fly into your new home country. So if you're lucky enough to have a little baby, in cabin may be an option for you. We have had folks who brought their animals in cargo. I think of Kelly McCoy, who moved from the US to Albania with her big meathead pit bull, giant animal, no way in cabin, and did great with bringing animals in cargo. And I think we just had somebody, Rachel Mims, who her two dogs flew in cargo from Texas to Spain. The third option that you can look into is a shared charter or private charter. That's the option that we took. There's a few companies out there, but we work with a company to do a shared private plane. And every time I say that, I feel like the Kardashian because I never thought I'd fly private. But it was an amazing experience. And for our two dogs, again, being French bulldogs, so a flat nose breed, they were too big to go in cabin on a regular commercial flight. No way to put them in cargo. I would never do that, specifically because of their breed. So it really was the option for us. Fourth option you can look into is hiring a pet transport company. So like a pet nanny who will manage everything in terms of paperwork, escort your pet. Usually they do fly in cargo, but it's a great option for the folks who need to get to their new home country first, get a little settled in, and either don't have the time or the means to fly back to the US and pick up their animals. I guess a wild card fifth option is going by boat. It is a 7-day, a 6-night, 7-day cruise from New York to Stockport in the UK. I will say that the Queen Mary gets booked years in advance. I think right now there's a 2-year waiting list, or they're booking for trips 2 years out. But that is an option, especially for the folks that are pre-planning. They know that they're a ways out from actually landing where they need to be. And again, that's all options for EU. Now we know we have folks going all over the place, not just European countries. So if you're curious to find out in terms of requirements of what that country needs, you can go to the USDA website. There's a drop down where you can select your new home country, and it'll lay out the paperwork requirements for your animal. And then it's just a matter of picking the option that works best for you in terms of bringing your animal over. But it's entirely doable.
Wow, amazing. I mean, we drove,
Yeah.
and that was a big reason why we chose Mexico. We have a pit bulldog mix and 3 cats when we crossed. And that made it easy for us. Just throw everybody in the car, and it was like we were taking a road trip,
Yeah.
one state over. It was a lot of effort, but it is much easier to move pets into Mexico than it is to Europe. At the time, you had to declare them, when you go through customs. We drove, of course, like I said, so we were crossing the land border, and you had to declare them and have general paperwork, tetanus shot, that sort of thing, a letter from the vet. And when we crossed, I tried to declare them. They just waved us on through. Didn't look, didn't ask a question. Nobody stopped us. Nothing happened. And then when we stopped at the office, the aduana, where you get your paperwork, I said, I've got my dog and this, and I've got this paperwork. They didn't look at it. They didn't come out and look at the animals. I could have had 17 horses and 4 pigs in the car, and nobody looked. Now,
They're just like, cool story.
Exactly. It was luck of the draw, though, right? And it was kind of sad
Yeah,
because
you never know.
to talk my animals. And of course, I had 2 cats who basically destroyed their carriers on days 1 and 3. So they were loose in the car the whole trip. It was a production in that car with
Yeah.
a dog and 2 loose cats and one good boy kitty who stayed in his carrier. But it was a big draw. And I don't know with Squiggy, we would have to fly him like you did. We'd have to charter because he isn't totally snub nosed, but he is a little bit. And then he's
Right.
also a pandemic baby and he's never been alone. So I can't imagine that he wouldn't be as smart as Rachel's standard poodles, for example.
No, they make the rest of our dogs look so bad. Yeah, ours, we ended up driving because we did the charter flying out of New York. So we drove from Texas to New York. So we had a little bit of the Jen and Brett experience of the extended road trip and a little bit of the flight experience. So I feel between those two, we've kind of experienced every possible scenario in terms of bringing a pet overseas. I think I was more stressed about it than what the reality actually ended up being. One of our dogs is a COVID dog as well. So, not the most socialized. He means well, but definitely not the most chill animal for sure. So I was so worried about, would they turn us away because he wouldn't stop barking? And honestly, it was such a relief, number one, to have a flight where it was just pet parents. And I feel maybe a little bit of empathy. It'd be like taking a flight with just moms with crying babies. And like, we get it. Everybody's stressed out. It's okay. Um, and also having we had a kind of a dedicated concierge on the flight. And there was a moment where Simon was just getting to be a little much and I was about to be in meltdown mode. And so she grabs him. She goes, do you want me to just like take him in the back for a little bit? And I go, yes, please. Because I think she could tell that I was about to hit that, oh my gosh, I can't handle it anymore. I'm about to start crying. And he was the best boy with her. Terrible with me. I have photos, and maybe we can link them down in the show notes, but I have a photo of him in her arms, and she's just hanging out with 7 other pet parents and their dogs, and he's just loving life, quiet, just as chill as can be. And of course, with me, he's a terror. So, but no, I definitely think that moving pets abroad is more stressful for us as pet parents than it is for the pets. And again, there's a right option for everybody.
Yeah. We even listen, I'll end with this. We have a client who's moving horses to Uruguay. So it can absolutely be done. If you need to get your zebras to Vietnam or whatever, we can figure out.
We had a rabbit on our flight.
I,
we had
that killed me. A rabbit on a flight full of dogs. It was truly the Frenchie Express.
Yeah, we had 4 Frenchies, Boston Terriers. It was the snub nose gang, and then 2 other dogs that we shunned because they had full snouts. But it was a great experience.
Amazing.
Well, let's shift to another question. Jen, we had somebody write in and ask, what countries are most American friendly? And we get this question a lot.
We do. And I have strong feelings about this that I'm going to share. The truth is, there are no countries that are American friendly. There are no countries that are not American friendly. There are just countries. And I think that being American, United Statesian, whatever you want to call it, being from the United States of America, we are used to kind of being the main character, right? Mm-hmm. And it genuinely is true. It is real. It isn't just a feeling. There are people who have positive feelings about the US and there are people who have negative feelings about the US, as you can imagine. But in general, countries don't want Americans and they don't not want Americans. They want nurses. They want teachers, electricians, IT professionals, or they want money. These are the 2 things that countries need. And they're looking for you if you can provide one of those 2 things or both. It depends. Or they want young minds to come in and help grow their economy. So countries don't think, wow, we sure want Americans.
Yeah.
They just think about what's good for their citizens. And you need to respect the fact that when you go into another country, you are not the big dog anymore.
It's not about you at that point.
It is not about you. And so it is about being a kind community member. And there just truly is no such thing. Now, there are a few policies out there that are especially friendly to Americans. One is in Albania. There is the opportunity to stay in that country for a year with no residency. And that is only true for Americans. I I don't know why we got that good deal, but we did. And so Albania, which is an amazing country in the Balkans, it's just north of Greece. And so it has that Mediterranean lifestyle and culture and diet. It is not in the EU, it is not in the Schengen zone. So it's a great place to go for a year and live on a very low cost of living. Our guide Kelly, speaking of which, with the meathead dog,
Yeah.
um, I think her rent was $150 a month for her apartment. And so it's an ideal place to go, especially if you are just need to get back on your feet, start up your business and get it to where it's uh profitable enough that you can move to another country or whatever else. And you may end up loving it and decide to stay, and that's awesome too. But so Albania has that policy. And then, of course, the Netherlands has the DAFT visa, and that stands for Dutch American Friendship Treaty. And this is one of the friendliest programs on earth for self employed folks. So you can go to the Netherlands. I believe you do most of the application process after you get there.
Correct.
You have to deposit about $5,000 locally, 4,500 euros, and have a place to live and be prepared to run your business from there. And it doesn't have to be established or profitable or exist really. It's just your commitment to it. The reason why it is so friendly for Americans, because it was done after World War II, specifically for Americans, probably as a thank you for the actions that the country took. Now, keeping that in mind, if we start to do the other kind of actions, it doesn't mean that this program can't end at any time. But the idea is that you deposit enough money locally to run your business. Now, 4,500 euros isn't a lot of money, but in 1948 or whenever the program was instituted, that can't be right. Anyway, in the 1940s, whenever the program was instituted, it was a lot of money, right? And the program still exists and hasn't changed. So those two programs are very friendly. But when people ask, who's rolling out the red carpet for Americans or who's slamming the door on Americans, the truth is virtually nobody. That sort of stuff. People don't look at you and say, you are Trump. They don't associate you with politics. They just associate you as a person, unless, of course, you show up and be a quote unquote ugly American.
Right. Absolutely. And I think recognizing the difference between, do they want Americans or do they like America? And recognizing that us as people is very different than the perception of what is happening from a, capital A America standpoint.
I thought you were going to say, do they want Americans or Americans?
Americans. Depending on what day of the week. Sometimes I'm an American when I can't remember my basic Portuguese, and sometimes I'm an American who just killing it out there on the streets. But yeah, separating us as people from the policy, and I think there's a recognition that those of us who are looking for something different and are putting forth the effort to, put together paperwork and put two French bulldogs on a flight and all these things that we're going through, that there is something separate about us from Trump and the current administration. So, separate the people from the place.
Yeah.
We have one other question that I want to address in this week's episode. We had somebody who asked, "How do I find healthcare?" I'm sure each country is different. So how would you answer that question, Jen, on how to find healthcare or how to navigate healthcare in your move abroad?
I feel like this is three questions in a trench coat, because there is how to find a doctor, how to find a service there is how to find insurance, and then there is how to treat my pre-existing condition.
Right.
And so it's hard to say which one they mean, but we'll address them all briefly, and we can share our own experiences in
Yeah.
Portugal and in Mexico. But in general, a lot of Americans think about other countries as offering universal health care. And of course, that seems it 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 might as well say that they're offering unicorns and fairies, because it's
Mhm.
just so hard to grasp what universal healthcare is for the average American. But they do. And in Portugal, for example, you qualify for it after 3 months of residency. Isn't that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
In Mexico, you have to be a resident and you have to pay into it. But to give you an idea, I'm in my mid 50s and it's about $60 a month if I wanted to pay into the public system. That said, Americans almost always take on private insurance. It's really common. It is so much comically less than what you're used to paying, and it does things like, the public system is the public system. And, we all get fear mongered that you never can see a doctor and you have to wait years, whatever. And it is slower when it comes to specialist care and
Mhm.
elective care and things like that. But for emergencies, phenomenal. But most Americans carry private care. I think it's positive to see private uh, physicians, private services, because it
Mhm.
supplements the public system for locals. It is a way that we can give back, because a doctor can, make a little bit of money from the private system so that they can stay in the public system and so on. In most cases, you can either choose between global insurance, where it covers you in all countries or numerous countries, usually except the US, because
Yeah.
nobody can include that, or you can get local insurance from a local provider. The local provider is a lot less.
Mhm.
People sometimes go with the global providers because they're trusted names like Cigna and Allianz and things like that. Alliance, I always call Allianz. Anyway, um, but it depends. So I have local insurance in Mexico, for example, and for me and Brett, and again, we're both middle aged.
Mhm.
Our coverage is $190 a month for both of us. It is very similar coverage to what I had in the US. We used Obamacare, that was going up to $2,100 a month this month. So for
Yeah.
less than a tenth of what we would have been paying in the US. And I can assure you that would have been all she wrote. And I would have had to stop being an entrepreneur and go back to work, because
Yeah.
how am I supposed to pay for that? We're startup.
Yeah.
And
Or you
so
do what I do, and it's just like, let's just cross our fingers and pick our battles. And if it's not bleeding or falling off, we just
no,
take some
no, you
ibuprofen
cannot
and
do
hope for
that.
the best.
You cannot do that. Oh my God, you get in an accident, something that's not your fault, and then you're bankrupt. You know how this goes. So the and the insurance here, the way it works, not to get totally into it, but one of
Yeah.
the interesting things about it is that we have a deductible. It's not terribly dissimilar from our deductible at home. However, here our deductible is per condition instead of per year. So if I were to develop ovarian cancer, I would only pay $6,000 for the rest of my life for anything related to ovarian cancer. So if it returned, if I had treatments over years, so keep that in mind. The
Mm.
second thing is that care is so much more accessible, at least in the private system. Here in Mexico, and I think that you have the same app in Portugal, we use an app called Doctoralia, and you pull it up, you find your provider. It's kind of like Health Grades or whatever, if you use those sites, or if you have Blue
Yeah.
Cross and you look for providers, except that in addition to listing all the providers, it also has appointment times, and you just pick one, just like it's someone's Calendly link, and the price. So all the prices are transparent. For private care here, if you're seeing, a practitioner, if you're getting an x-ray, you just pay out of pocket. I'm not going to file a claim for it. My mammogram, as an example, was $8. and that was without insurance. And I got it an hour after I made the appointment. And I was in and out in 20 minutes. And the person who gave me the mammogram was a radiologist. So I left with my results. And
Yeah.
that is really common. So I find care to be more accessible and more affordable. But the third thing is, I find it to be more compassionate. Here
Mhm.
in Mexico, in particular, the pattern, and this has been universal, and we've seen maybe 20 providers since we moved here because we got real greedy getting all the healthcare.
Yeah.
But they spend insane amount of time with you, explaining to you in laborious detail everything going on in your body, pulling out models, pulling up websites, showing you everything. And they really are obsessed with getting to the bottom of anything, to the point where when I went to a dermatologist, he's like, okay, well, let's go get you a bunch of blood work done first. So I make sure I give you the right skin cream.
Yeah.
And it's really, really common. So how you find healthcare will kind of depend on your path. If you're in Europe and you're on the public system, there are processes where they might assign you a physician or you use a directory. If you're using global insurance, there's a number where you can call and ask for recommendations. But finally, and especially if you have a pre-existing condition, it's Facebook groups. At the end of the day, you find a Facebook group for people who are dealing with um, multiple sclerosis in Europe, and you start to share ideas and recommendations, and that's another way you can find healthcare.
Yeah, uh we got private insurance, local insurance here in Portugal is, part of our visa process for this next step. My partner and I am, I'm 47, he's 46. We're, normal kind of middle-aged Americans with normal middle-aged American stuff. Both of us combined, I think our deductible is 2,500. And it's 665 euros a year for both of us combined. Uh, I know. There was a
I'm
time when
sorry.
I
That's like
and
$60 a month for both of you.
for both of us combined, and it's because we didn't pick the best, we didn't pick the lowest coverage, and, so kind of middle of the road coverage. It includes some prescription stuff, and, if we go in network, like normal checkups are covered like 100%. We don't even have to like worry about a copay. Like they're like a copay. What is a copay? So being able to find that and now being able to have insurance where, the last quote that I got, being self-employed was just for me was, I want to say $900 a month. And that was with a $7,500 deductible. And
Yes.
I was like, well, I might as well just pay out of pocket. And if something terrible happens, well, fingers crossed, knock on wood that it doesn't. Because, you talk about, would it bankrupt you if an accident happened? Yeah, but it could also bankrupt me if I had insurance and nothing happened. So you're kind of wishing something happened so that insurance actually is worth something. But here's, 665 a year, and, we'll probably end up bumping up the tier, as we get more settled.
Splurge. Treat
I know
yourself.
we're gonna splurge on $1,200 a year insurance for us two middle-aged adults. One of the things that I learned about healthcare here in Portugal is you don't have to go to your primary doctor to see a specialist. So if you
Yeah.
want to go to a specialist, or you don't have to go through your GP each and every time. The other thing that I love about healthcare, especially here in Europe, is the role that the pharmacy plays.
Oh,
It's not like in the US, and this is true in when I was in the UK and Ireland, and uh one the thing about the pharmacists here, and we saw the same thing in Spain, is it isn't just, what did your doctor prescribe? Great, here you go.
true.
They kind of serve as a little bit of triage, and they have a little bit more, I don't want to say power, but they have a little bit more authority to go, okay, great. Talk to me about what's going on. Let's figure out a solution. Can I provide a solution? Now, obviously controlled substances, that's that sort of thing. But if you need just some amoxicillin because you're running a fever
Yep.
and your throat is sore, you don't have to go to a minute clinic or wait for your doctor to have an opening 3 days from now and then get that prescription and go to a pharmacist. If it's something that feels relatively routine, they can serve that role as well. So I love pharmacy culture here in Europe, and we see it in a lot of countries outside of the US.
Amazing. Oh, we'll have to talk about this more because
Mhm.
we can share all kind of healthcare stories. It is a huge benefit to moving abroad.
Well, I'm glad we got some questions answered this week, Jen.
Yeah, me too. Please send more questions into podcast@expatsy.com and we'll see if we can answer them in later episodes.
Americans Abroad is an Expatsy production. Please like, share, subscribe, and leave a review. Are you thinking about moving abroad? Start with our quiz at expatsy.com. That's EXPATSI.com.